The blood running down her temple wasn't what scared Clara Vaughn most as she stumbled through the desert heat toward the mission walls. It was the absolute certainty that the people who raised her, who called themselves family for 19 years, had finally decided she wasn't worth the trouble anymore. The wagon had stopped 3 miles back, and her stepfather had told her to get out. No explanation beyond the cold words that still rang in her ears like church bells announcing a funeral. The mission would take her in, he said. They always took in strays. Then he had driven away with her mother sitting silent beside him, not even turning to look back at the girl they'd raised since she was barely walking. Clara's hands shook as she pushed open the heavy wooden door of Mission San Miguel. The cool darkness inside made her dizzy after hours under the merciless New Mexico sun. It was August of 1878, and the heat had been brutal for weeks. Her dress clung to her back with sweat, and her throat felt like sandpaper. A nun appeared from the shadows, her face lined with concern. "Child, you're hurt." "They left me," Clara whispered. Then her knees gave out. She woke on a narrow cot in a small room that smelled of lye soap and dried herbs. Her head had been bandaged, and someone had given her water. The nun from before sat on a wooden chair nearby, her weathered hands folded in her lap. "I'm Sister Margaret. You've been asleep for several hours. Can you tell me your name?" "Clara Vaughn. My family, they brought me from Boise, Idaho. We were supposed to be traveling through to Texas, but they—" Her voice cracked. "They don't want me anymore." Sister Margaret's expression softened with understanding. "The mission can shelter you for a time, but Clara, we have very little here. We take in orphans and abandoned children, but our resources are stretched thin. We can offer you a bed and meals, but beyond that—" She trailed off, the unspoken reality hanging between them. Clara spent the next 2 weeks at the mission, helping where she could. She worked in the garden, mended clothing, and tried not to think about how her entire life had crumbled in the span of a single afternoon. The other residents were mostly children under 12, their faces gaunt with hunger that the mission could barely address. She learned that her parents had left her a small bag of her belongings but nothing else. No money, no letter, no explanation that made any sense of their cruelty. At night, lying on her cot, Clara would replay every moment of her childhood, searching for signs she'd missed. Had they always resented her? Had she been a burden they'd finally decided to shed? The questions ate at her worse than any physical pain. On the 15th day, everything changed. Clara was in the courtyard hanging laundry when she heard horses approaching. She looked up to see 3 riders coming through the gate. The man in front sat tall in his saddle, his broad shoulders blocking out the late afternoon sun. He had dark hair that needed cutting and a face that looked carved from the same rock that made up the New Mexico mountains. Even from a distance, she could see his eyes were a startling shade of blue. Sister Margaret hurried out to greet them. "Can we help you, gentlemen?" The dark-haired man dismounted with easy grace. "We're hoping to water our horses and refill our canteens if you can spare it. We've been on the trail from Santa Fe for 3 days. "Of course. Clara, would you help these men with their horses?" Clara nodded, setting down the laundry basket. She approached cautiously, keeping her eyes lowered. The tall cowboy was closer now, and she could see the trail dust on his clothes, the worn leather of his boots. He looked at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Much obliged, miss," he said, his voice deeper than she'd expected. "Name's Austin Marlowe, Clara Vaughn." She took the reins he offered, her fingers brushing his calloused palm for just a moment. As she led the horses to the trough, she could feel him watching her. The other 2 men, older and grizzled, were already talking with Sister Margaret about the state of the roads ahead. Austin followed Clara to the water. "You work here at the mission?" he asked. "I'm staying here temporarily." Temporarily. He said it like he understood there was a story behind the word. "Where's home?" "I don't have one anymore." The words came out before she could stop them, raw and honest. Austin was quiet for a moment, studying her face. "Family trouble. They left me here 2 weeks ago. Said the mission would take me in." Clara focused on the horses, not wanting to see pity in his eyes. "That's a hard thing." "It is what it is." She tried to sound stronger than she felt. One of the other men called out, "Austin, we should move on if we want to make San Antonio before dark." Austin didn't respond right away. He was still looking at Clara, something working behind those blue eyes. Finally, he turned and walked back to where Sister Margaret stood with his companions. Clara busied herself with the horses, trying not to eavesdrop, but voices carried in the courtyard. "Sister, what's the girl's situation?" Austin's voice was low but clear. "Clara was abandoned here by her family. We've given her shelter, but we can't keep her indefinitely. We barely have enough to feed the children. Where will she go? I don't know. She has no money, no prospects. Perhaps we can find her work in one of the nearby towns, but for a young woman alone." Sister Margaret's concern was evident. Clara felt her cheeks burn with shame. She didn't want to be discussed like a problem that needed solving. There was a long pause, then Austin spoke again. "I could use help on my ranch. I've got land outside of Amarillo, Texas. It's a long journey, but the work is honest and I pay fair wages. You're offering her employment." Sister Margaret sounded surprised. "I'm offering her a chance. Better than waiting here with no future." "Mr. Marlowe, I don't know you. How can I send a young woman off with a stranger?" "You can't, which is why I'm asking her, not telling her. It's her choice." Clara's heart was pounding. She turned to find Austin looking directly at her across the courtyard. "What do you say, Miss Vaughn? You can stay here and hope something works out, or you can travel with me and have a job waiting. I can't promise it'll be easy, but I can promise you won't be abandoned again." The words hit her like a physical blow, but not in a bad way. They felt like a lifeline thrown to someone drowning. She walked back toward them, her legs steadier than they'd been in weeks. "Why would you do this for someone you don't know?" Austin's expression was serious. "Because everyone deserves a second chance, and because I recognize the look of someone who's been dealt a bad hand. I've been there myself." "Your ranch, what kind of work would I be doing? Cooking, cleaning, helping with the books if you can read and write?" "I've got ranch hands, but no one to manage the house. My mother used to do it before she passed last year. It's been chaos since." Clara looked at Sister Margaret, who seemed torn between concern and relief. "It's your decision, Clara. I cannot make it for you." Every rational part of Clara's mind screamed caution. Austin Marlowe was a stranger. She knew nothing about him except what he'd told her in the last 10 minutes. But staying at the mission meant waiting for a future that might never come, being a burden on people who could barely afford their current responsibilities. And there was something in Austin's eyes, something honest and steady that made her want to trust him. "When would we leave?" she asked. "Dawn tomorrow. It's a week's ride to Amarillo, maybe more depending on weather and trail conditions." Clara took a deep breath. "Then I'll be ready at dawn." Austin nodded, a hint of something that might have been approval crossing his face. "Bring whatever you have. We'll supply the rest on the trail." His two companions looked at each other with raised eyebrows but said nothing. They finished watering their horses and rode out toward San Antonio to conduct whatever business had brought them this way. Sister Margaret touched Clara's arm. "Are you certain about this?" "No," Clara admitted. "But I'm not certain about anything anymore. At least this is a choice I'm making for myself." That night, Clara packed her small bag with the few possessions she owned. 2 dresses, a hairbrush, a book of poetry that had been a gift years ago, and a silver locket that held no pictures but had been her grandmother's. Everything she had in the world fit in a canvas bag that weighed less than 10 pounds. She couldn't sleep. Her mind raced with possibilities both terrifying and exciting. Tomorrow she would leave with a man she didn't know, ride across territory she'd never seen, to start a life she couldn't imagine. It was madness. It was also the first time since being abandoned that she felt like she had any control over her destiny. Austin returned before sunrise, riding alone this time. His horse was a magnificent bay gelding that moved with controlled power. He had an extra horse with him, a gentle-looking mare with a white blaze on her forehead. "She's yours for the journey," he said, nodding toward the mare. "Her name's Daisy. She's steady and won't give you trouble." Clara had ridden before, though not extensively. Her stepfather had taught her basic horsemanship when she was younger, back when he'd still seemed to care about her welfare. She approached Daisy carefully, letting the horse smell her hand before stroking the soft nose. Sister Margaret came out with a small package wrapped in cloth. "Food for your journey. It's not much, but it will help." "Thank you," Clara said, surprised to find tears in her eyes. "For everything." The nun pulled her into a brief embrace. "God go with you, child. You have more strength than you know." Austin helped Clara onto Daisy's back, his hands steadying her without lingering inappropriately. He tied her bag to his own saddle and swung up onto his horse with the ease of someone who'd spent most of his life in a saddle. "We'll ride easy today. Let you get used to Daisy and the trail. We need to make good time, but I won't push you beyond your limits." They rode out as the sun was painting the eastern sky shades of gold and pink. Clara looked back once at the mission walls, then turned her face forward. Whatever lay ahead, it was hers to face. The first hours passed in relative silence. Austin seemed content to let her adjust to the rhythm of riding, offering only occasional directions or observations about the landscape. The desert gradually gave way to grassland, and the heat, while still intense, felt less oppressive with the movement of air around them. Around midday, Austin called for a stop near a small creek shaded by cottonwood trees. He helped Clara down from Daisy, and she realized how sore she already was. He noticed her grimace. "First long ride in a while, first long ride ever, really. We traveled by wagon mostly. You'll toughen up. It takes a few days, but then your body adjusts." He unpacked some dried meat and hardtack from his saddlebag, adding some of the food Sister Margaret had provided. "Not fancy, but it'll keep us going." They sat in the shade, and Clara found herself studying him more openly now. Austin looked to be in his mid-20s, maybe 26 or 27. His face was weathered by sun and wind with small lines at the corners of his eyes. His hands were scarred and calloused, the hands of someone who worked hard for everything he had. "Can I ask you something?" Clara ventured. "Go ahead." "Why did you really offer to help me? You don't know anything about me. I could be trouble." Austin finished chewing before answering. "You want the honest truth?" "Yes. When I was 17, my father kicked me out of the house. Said I was too much like my mother's people and not enough like him. My mother was half Comanche, and my father was an Irish immigrant who spent most of his time drunk and mean. I wandered for months, working odd jobs, sleeping rough. An old rancher named Tom Fisher finally took a chance on me, taught me everything about running cattle and managing land. When he died, he left me his ranch, changed my whole life." Clara absorbed this information. "So you're paying it forward." "Something like that." "Also, I meant what I said about needing help at the ranch. It's not charity, Clara. You'll earn your wages." "I'm a hard worker," she said firmly. "I won't let you down." "I don't think you will." He stood, offering his hand to help her up. "We should keep moving." There's a better camping spot about 2 hours north. We'll stop there for the night." As they rode through the afternoon, Austin began to talk more, pointing out landmarks and telling stories about the territory. He had a way of speaking that was both economical and engaging, never using two words where one would do, but making those words count. Clara found herself relaxing despite her sore muscles. There was something inherently trustworthy about Austin Marlowe. He hadn't tried to impress her or make false promises. He'd simply offered her honest work and a fair chance, which was more than her own family had given her. When they made camp that evening near a small stand of juniper trees, Austin showed her how to properly unsaddle and care for the horses. He built a fire with practiced efficiency and cooked beans with bits of salt pork that tasted better than anything Clara had eaten in weeks. As the stars emerged overhead, brilliant and countless, Clara wrapped herself in the blanket Austin had provided and stared up at the vast sky. "It's beautiful out here," she said softly. Austin was sitting across the fire, his face half in shadow. "It's a hard land, but yeah, it has its moments. Tell me about your ranch. What's it like?" "About 2,000 acres of decent grazing land. Got a herd of about 500 cattle right now, hoping to double that in the next year. The house is solid, built it myself with help from my hands. 3 bedrooms, a good kitchen, a parlor with a stone fireplace. It's not fancy, but it's comfortable. It sounds wonderful. It's home." He paused. "You'll have your own room, your privacy. I want you to know that, Clara. This is a job offer, nothing more. I'm not expecting anything beyond honest work." Clara felt a weight she hadn't fully acknowledged lift from her shoulders. "Thank you for saying that," needed to be said. He stood and stretched. "We should get some sleep. Dawn comes early." Clara lay on her bedroll, listening to the night sounds of the desert and the crackling of the dying fire. For the first time since her parents had abandoned her, she felt something that might have been hope stirring in her chest. The journey continued over the next several days, falling into a comfortable rhythm. They would wake with the sun, ride through the morning with a brief stop at midday, then push on until evening. Austin proved to be patient with her inexperience, never showing frustration when she needed to adjust her pace or rest her aching muscles. On the 3rd day, they encountered a group of travelers heading in the opposite direction. The men eyed Clara with a mixture of curiosity and something less wholesome that made her uncomfortable. Austin positioned his horse between her and the strangers, his hand resting casually near the rifle strapped to his saddle. "Afternoon," he said pleasantly, but Clara could hear the steel underneath the courtesy. The travelers moved on without incident, but Clara noticed how Austin remained tense until they were well out of sight. Does that happen often? Men looking for trouble, often enough. This is still wild country in a lot of ways. Law is thin on the ground once you get away from the bigger towns. He looked at her seriously. "When we get to the ranch, I'll teach you to shoot if you don't already know how. Woman alone needs to be able to protect herself." "I've never fired a gun." "Then you'll learn. It's not negotiable, Clara. The world isn't always kind, especially to women. You need to be able to defend yourself." His protectiveness was new to Clara. Her stepfather had never cared enough to worry about her safety. Austin's concern felt foreign but deeply comforting. That evening, they camped near a small town called Tucumcari. Austin rode in to get supplies, leaving Clara with the horses and strict instructions to stay put and out of sight. He returned an hour later with fresh bread, cheese, and apples, luxuries after days of trail rations. "Thought you might like something that didn't come from a saddle bag," he said, handing her an apple. The sweetness of the fruit was almost overwhelming. Clara bit into it slowly, savoring every taste. "This is wonderful." Austin smiled, and Clara realized it was the first time she'd seen him truly smile. It transformed his face, softening the hard edges and revealing a warmth she'd only glimpsed before. "Simple things taste better on the trail," he said. They ate their meal in companionable silence, and Clara found herself watching Austin more openly now. He moved with unconscious grace, whether handling the horses or building the fire. There was a competence to everything he did that spoke of years of practice and self-reliance. "Can I ask about your mother?" Clara ventured. "You said she was Comanche." Austin's expression grew distant but not closed. "She was beautiful, strong. She taught me to read the land, to respect it. Her people didn't accept her marriage to my father, and white society never fully accepted her. She lived between two worlds and never quite fit in either one. That must have been hard." It was, but she never complained, never let bitterness take root. She said every hardship was a chance to prove her strength. He paused. "I think you would have liked her. She had a soft spot for strays and underdogs." "Is that what I am, a stray?" "We're all strays in one way or another, Clara. The lucky ones find where they belong." The words settled over her like a blanket. "Do you think I'll belong at your ranch?" "I think you'll make a place for yourself wherever you decide to be. That's not about the ranch. That's about you." The conversation stayed with Clara long after they'd settled into their bedrolls. Austin's faith in her was bewildering but also empowering. He treated her like someone capable, someone worthwhile, and it made her want to prove him right. On the 5th day, they crossed into Texas. The landscape shifted again, becoming more varied with rolling hills and patches of scrub forest. Austin pointed out landmarks, teaching her to read the land the way his mother had taught him. "See that rock formation? Looks like a sitting dog from this angle. Good landmark to remember if you ever need to navigate back this way." Clara absorbed everything he told her, filing it away. She was learning that survival in this country meant paying attention, remembering details, and respecting the power of nature. That afternoon, they encountered a rattlesnake on the trail. Daisy shied, and Clara nearly lost her seat. Austin was beside her in an instant, steadying her horse while simultaneously moving his own mount to keep the snake from striking. "Easy, easy," he murmured, though Clara wasn't sure if he was talking to her or the horses. He waited until the snake had slithered off the trail before relaxing. "You okay?" "Yes, thank you." Her heart was pounding. "Rattlers are common out here. Just make noise when you're walking around, especially in the morning when they're sluggish. They'll usually move off if they hear you coming." "Usually. Nothing's guaranteed in nature, Clara. That's why you stay alert and respect everything that can hurt you." As they rode on, Clara found herself thinking about how different her life had become in just a week. She'd gone from abandoned and hopeless to learning how to survive in wild country with a man who seemed determined to give her every tool she'd need to thrive. On the 6th day, they stopped in a small town called Naland to resupply and rest the horses. Austin rented Clara a room at the local boarding house, insisting she have a proper bed and the chance to bathe and wash her clothes. "You don't have to do that," Clara protested. "I can manage with camping." "I know you can, but that doesn't mean you should when there's a better option available. Take the comfort when you can get it, Clara. Life will hand you enough hard times without you refusing the easy ones." The hot bath and clean bed felt like heaven. Clara washed her hair and her clothes, hanging the latter to dry by the window. She studied her reflection in the small mirror above the wash basin. The girl looking back at her seemed different from the one who'd stumbled into the mission 2 weeks ago. Her face was sunburned despite the bonnet Austin had bought her in Tucumcari, and her hands were developing calluses from handling the reins. But her eyes looked clearer, more focused. She looked like someone finding her way. They met for dinner at the boarding house dining room. Austin had cleaned up too, shaving and changing into a fresh shirt. Clara found herself noticing things about him she hadn't paid attention to before. The way his dark hair curled slightly when it was clean, the breadth of his shoulders, the way his eyes crinkled when he was amused. "You look rested," he observed. "I feel almost human again." She smiled. "Thank you for this. The room, the meal, all of it. You've done well on the trail, better than I expected, honestly. Not many people take to this life so quickly. I didn't have much choice." "Everyone has choices, Clara. You could have stayed at the mission, could have refused to leave with me, could have turned back any day on the trail. You chose to keep going. That takes courage." His words made her chest tight with emotion. "I don't feel very courageous." Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's moving forward despite it. They lingered over dinner longer than necessary, talking about everything and nothing. Clara told him about growing up in Boise, about the books she loved to read, about her dreams of seeing the ocean someday. Austin talked about his plans for the ranch, about the cattle market and water rights, but also about smaller things like his favorite season and the best way to make coffee on a campfire. It was the most normal conversation Clara had had in months, maybe years. With her step-parents, every word had been weighed and measured, careful not to provoke anger or disappointment. With Austin, she could just be herself. As they parted for the night, Austin touched her arm briefly. "We'll make Amarillo tomorrow evening if we push hard. You ready to see your new home?" "I think so. I'm nervous, but yes." It's natural to be nervous. New places, new situations. But Clara, whatever happens, you're not alone anymore. Remember that. The final day of travel passed in a blur of anticipation and anxiety. Clara's muscles no longer ached quite so badly, and she'd grown comfortable with Daisy's steady gait. The landscape became more familiar to Austin, and she could see him relaxing, sitting easier in the saddle as they approached home territory. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, Austin pointed ahead. "There. That's the beginning of ranch land." Clara looked but could only see endless grass and distant hills. "Where?" "See that fence line. Starts there and runs for miles. The main house is about 30 minutes further." As they rode through the tall grass, Clara began to see cattle scattered across the range, their red and white hides bright in the golden light. Several cowboys working the herd raised hands in greeting as Austin passed, their curious gazes landing on Clara before returning to their work. Then the house came into view, and Clara caught her breath. It was bigger than she'd expected, a solid structure of wood and stone nestled against a rise in the land. A wide porch wrapped around the front, and she could see multiple windows reflecting the sunset. There was a barn and several outbuildings, corrals, and a windmill turning lazily in the breeze. "It's beautiful," she breathed. Austin looked pleased. "Welcome home, Clara, home." The word resonated through her like a bell. Could this really become home? Could she really belong here? They dismounted in front of the barn, and immediately 2 ranch hands appeared to take the horses. Both men were older, weathered by years of hard work, but their eyes were kind. "Boss," one said, nodding to Austin before turning curious eyes on Clara. "This is Clara Vaughn. She'll be managing the house from now on. Clara, this is Pete and Rawlings. They've been with me since I started the ranch." "Madam," both men said, touching the brims of their hats. "It's nice to meet you," Clara said, meaning it. Austin led her toward the house, carrying her small bag despite her protest. Inside, the main room was spacious but clearly in need of a woman's touch. The furniture was solid but arranged haphazardly, and dust covered most surfaces. The kitchen visible beyond was similarly neglected, though she could see it had good bones with a large cast iron stove and plenty of workspace. "I know it's a mess," Austin said apologetically. We've tried, but none of us have the knack for keeping a house properly. It's fine. It's wonderful, actually. Clara turned in a slow circle, already imagining what the space could become with proper care. Where's my room? He showed her upstairs to a bedroom that faced east. It had a real bed with a quilt, a dresser, a washstand, and a window that overlooked the ranch land stretching toward the sunrise. It was my mother's sewing room, Austin said. But I moved the sewing things out and brought in furniture I thought you'd need. If there's anything else you want, just let me know. Clara set her bag on the bed and turned to face him. Austin, I don't know how to thank you for all of this. You'll thank me by making this house a home again. That's all I need. He moved toward the door, then paused. There's a lock on the inside of the door. Use it if it makes you feel safer. I want you to be comfortable here, Clara. After he'd gone, Clara did lock the door, but only because she needed privacy to let the tears come. They weren't tears of sadness, but of relief so profound it overwhelmed her. She had a place to be, work to do, and a man who treated her with respect and kindness. After the nightmare of the past weeks, it felt like a miracle. The next morning, Clara woke early and dressed in her work dress. Downstairs, she found the kitchen cold and empty. She set about building a fire in the stove, grateful for the skills she'd learned at the mission. Soon, she had coffee brewing and was investigating the pantry to see what ingredients were available. The supplies were abundant but poorly organized. She found flour, sugar, salt, dried beans, cured meat, and various canned goods all jumbled together. There was butter in the cold cellar and eggs in a basket by the back door. She could work with this. By the time Austin came downstairs, Clara had breakfast ready: scrambled eggs, bacon, biscuits with butter and jam, and strong coffee. He stopped in the doorway of the kitchen, staring. Is that what I think it is? Breakfast. Sit down before it gets cold. He sat at the table like a man in a daze and ate 3 helpings of everything. Clara, I haven't had a real breakfast in this house since my mother passed. The boys and I usually just grab whatever we can find and eat on the run. Well, those days are over. I'll have dinner ready at 6 unless you tell me different, and I expect you and whoever else is eating here to show up on time. Austin grinned. Yes, madam. Over the next few weeks, Clara threw herself into transforming the house. She cleaned every room until they shone, organized the pantry and kitchen, mended curtains and linens, and even convinced Austin to let her plant a garden near the kitchen door. The ranch hands, initially skeptical, quickly became her devoted admirers when word spread about her cooking. Pete, the older of the 2 main hands, told Austin within her hearing, "Boss, you better make sure that girl never leaves. Best meals we've had in 5 years." Clara felt herself settling into the rhythm of ranch life. She woke before dawn to start breakfast, spent her days cooking, cleaning, mending, and managing the household accounts, which Austin had gratefully turned over to her once he discovered she had a head for numbers. Her evenings were spent in the parlor, often with Austin, where they would talk about the day or simply sit in comfortable silence while she mended, and he worked on ranch paperwork. She began to notice things about Austin that made her heart beat faster. The way he was unfailingly kind to his animals and his men. How he always made sure she had what she needed before seeing to his own comfort. The rare moments when he laughed, his whole face lighting up with genuine joy. His hands, strong and scarred but gentle when handling a hurt animal or helping her move something heavy. One evening about a month after her arrival, a cow had difficult labor, and Austin stayed up all night in the barn to help. Clara brought him coffee and food throughout the long hours, finally settling in the hayloft to wait with him. "You should be sleeping," Austin said, his shirt sleeves rolled up and his face drawn with exhaustion. So should you. This is my job, and you're my employer. Making sure you eat and don't collapse is my job. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and Clara felt something shift between them. The air in the barn suddenly felt charged with possibility. Clara, he started, then stopped. The cow lowed in distress, and the moment broke. He turned back to his work, and by dawn, a healthy calf was standing on wobbly legs beside its mother. Austin walked Clara back to the house as the sun rose, both of them exhausted but satisfied. At the kitchen door, he touched her hand briefly. "Thank you for staying with me." "Of course." "I mean it. Having you here, he trailed off, seeming to struggle with words. "It's made everything better. The house, the ranch, my life, everything." Clara's breath caught. "Austin, I know it's only been a month. I know you probably still see me as just your employer. But Clara, I need you to know that you've become important to me, more important than I expected." Her heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. "You've become important to me too." His hand tightened on hers. "I don't want to rush you or make you uncomfortable. You've been through enough without me complicating things, but I also can't pretend I don't feel what I feel." "What do you feel?" Clara whispered. "Like I've been waiting for you my whole life without knowing it." Clara's eyes filled with tears, but they were happy tears. "I feel it too. I've been trying not to, trying to keep things professional, but Austin, I can't help it. When you're near, everything feels right. When you're gone, I count the minutes until you're back." He cupped her face gently with his free hand. "Can I kiss you?" "Yes." The kiss was soft and careful, a question and an answer all at once. When they parted, Austin rested his forehead against hers. "I'm going to court you properly. I want to do this right. We're living in the same house. That's hardly a conventional courtship. I don't care about convention. I care about you knowing that you're precious to me, that this isn't about convenience or proximity. This is about you, Clara Vaughn, and how you've turned my world upside down in the best possible way." Over the following weeks, Austin courted her with a sweetness that made her heart ache. He brought her wildflowers from the range. He taught her to ride better, spending hours in the corral with her until she could handle Daisy with confidence. He took her on picnics to beautiful spots on the ranch land, showing her sunsets from hilltops and streams hidden in valleys. The ranch hands noticed, of course, but their teasing was gentle and good-natured. Pete told Clara one afternoon while she was hanging laundry, "Never seen the boss so happy." "You're good for him, madam." "He's good for me too," Clara admitted. The old cowboy nodded sagely. "Some people are meant to find each other. You two, you fit." Clara thought about that often. How she and Austin did fit together, like pieces of a puzzle that had been missing parts for too long. They balanced each other, his quiet steadiness and her organized energy, his knowledge of the land and her management of the home. More than that, they genuinely enjoyed each other's company. They could talk for hours or sit in comfortable silence. They made each other laugh. They supported each other's dreams. 3 months after Clara's arrival, on an October evening when the air had finally begun to cool, Austin asked her to take a walk with him after dinner. They strolled toward the rise behind the house, where the view stretched for miles in every direction. "I've been thinking," Austin said, his hand warm around hers, about how this ranch was just a place before you came. Now it's a home. You made it a home. I just cleaned it up." "No, Clara. A home needs more than clean surfaces and good meals. It needs heart, and you brought that here." He turned to face her, his blue eyes serious in the fading light. "I love you. I think I started falling in love with you that first day at the mission when you looked at me with all that hurt and hope mixed together and decided to trust me anyway." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "I love you too, so much it scares me sometimes. Don't be scared, I've got you and I'm not letting go." He pulled a small box from his pocket. "This was my mother's. My father gave it to her when they married, one of the few good things he ever did. I want you to have it if you'll accept it." The ring inside was simple but beautiful, a single small diamond set in gold. Clara looked from the ring to Austin's hopeful face. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you." He slipped the ring on her finger and kissed her with a passion that left them both breathless. When they finally drew apart, both were grinning like fools. "When?" Clara asked. "Whenever you want. Tomorrow, next month, next year. I just need to know you're mine." "I've been yours since you told me I was traveling with you," Clara said. "I just didn't know it yet." They decided on a wedding date in early December, giving Clara time to prepare and allowing Austin to finish some critical ranch business before winter set in. They sent word to the small church in Amarillo, and Austin rode to town to make arrangements with the minister. Clara had no family to invite, a fact that still hurt when she let herself think about it, but Austin's ranch hands and their families became her people. The wives of Pete and Rawlings took her under their wings, helping her make a wedding dress from fabric Austin brought back from town. It was simple but elegant, cream-colored with lace at the collar and cuffs. The night before the wedding, Austin's best friend arrived from Santa Fe. His name was James, and he'd known Austin since they were teenagers working together on Tom Fisher's ranch. "So you're the woman who finally caught Austin," James said with a broad smile. "I didn't think anyone would ever pin him down." "I didn't catch him," Clara protested. "We found each other. However it happened, I'm glad. He's been alone too long." The wedding took place on a crisp December morning with blue sky stretching overhead. The small church in Amarillo was decorated with winter greenery and white ribbons. Clara walked down the aisle alone, her head high, and saw Austin waiting for her at the altar with tears in his eyes. The ceremony was simple but meaningful. When Austin slipped a gold band onto her finger beside the engagement ring, his voice was thick with emotion. "With this ring, I thee wed." "With this ring, I thee wed," Clara repeated, her own voice breaking. "You may kiss your bride." The kiss was long and sweet, and when they turned to face their friends, Clara felt complete in a way she'd never experienced before. She wasn't abandoned anymore. She wasn't unwanted. She was loved, cherished, and chosen. The celebration afterward at the ranch was joyful and loud. The hands had roasted a steer, and there was more food than anyone could possibly eat. There was music and dancing, and Austin waltzed Clara around the yard until they were both dizzy and laughing. As the evening wound down and guests began to depart, Austin led Clara into the house and up the stairs. He'd moved her belongings into his room, now their room, and someone had filled it with candles and flowers. "I love you, Mrs. Marlowe," Austin said, pulling her close. "I love you too," Clara whispered, and then there was no more need for words. Their first year of marriage was full of joy and hard work. The ranch thrived under their combined management. Clara's efficient household practices saved money and improved morale among the hands. Austin's careful breeding program increased the cattle herd's quality. They worked as a team, supporting each other through challenges and celebrating successes together. In late summer, Clara discovered she was pregnant. She told Austin one evening after dinner, simply handing him the tiny knitted booty she'd started making. He looked at it in confusion, then understanding dawned. "Clara, are you saying? We're going to have a baby. In February, I think." Austin let out a whoop of joy that probably scared the cattle in the near pasture. He picked her up and spun her around, then immediately set her down carefully, worried he'd hurt her. Clara laughed. "I'm not made of glass. The baby will be fine." "Our baby," Austin said wonderingly. "Clara, I can't believe it. I'm going to be a father." "You're going to be a wonderful father." He pulled her close, his hand resting on her still flat stomach. Thank you. Thank you for trusting me that day at the mission. Thank you for taking a chance on me. Thank you for making my life more beautiful than I ever imagined it could be. You saved me, Austin. You gave me a future when I thought I had none. We saved each other, he corrected. And now we're building something bigger than both of us. The pregnancy progressed smoothly despite Clara's occasional worries. Austin was attentive without being overbearing, making sure she rested but not treating her like an invalid. He built a cradle in his workshop, smooth and sturdy, and Clara sewed tiny gowns and blankets. In February, during a cold spell that had everyone huddled near fires, Clara went into labor. The local midwife, Mrs. Henderson, came to attend along with Sarah, Pete's wife. Austin paced the downstairs parlor, driving Pete and the other hands crazy with his nervous energy. After 12 hours of labor, a baby's cry rang through the house. Austin took the stairs 3 at a time and burst into the bedroom. "A son," Mrs. Henderson announced, holding up a squalling, red-faced infant. Healthy and strong lunged. Austin approached the bed where Clara lay exhausted but smiling. She held out her arms and Mrs. Henderson placed the baby in them. "He's perfect," Clara breathed. Austin sat on the edge of the bed, staring at his son with wonder. "He really is." They named him Thomas Fisher Marlowe, after the man who'd given Austin his chance. Little Tom had his father's dark hair and his mother's delicate features. From the beginning, he was an easy baby, content to be held or to lie in his cradle watching the world with curious eyes. Austin proved to be a devoted father, involved in every aspect of Tom's care despite the ranch's demands. He would walk the floor at night when the baby fussed, singing old songs his mother had taught him. He built toys and spent hours playing with his son, even when Tom was too young to do more than wave his arms and coo. Watching Austin with their son made Clara fall even more deeply in love with her husband. He was gentle and patient, teaching by example, always ready with encouragement and affection. 2 years later, Clara gave birth to a daughter they named Mary Elizabeth. She had her father's blue eyes and her mother's chestnut hair. If Tom had been an easy baby, Mary was his opposite. She had opinions from the start and wasn't afraid to express them loudly. "She's got spirit," Austin said one night, walking a crying Mary around the bedroom while Clara tried to catch a few minutes of sleep. "Just like her mother." "I was never that loud," Clara mumbled into her pillow. "No, but you're just as determined to have things your way." His voice was full of affection. Life settled into a new rhythm with 2 children. The house that had once been too quiet was now filled with the sounds of family. Children laughing and crying, toys clattering, little feet running. Clara sometimes felt overwhelmed by the demands of motherhood and maintaining the household, but Austin was always there to support her. "You're doing an amazing job," he would tell her when she felt frazzled and inadequate. "Our children are happy, healthy, and loved. That's what matters." The ranch continued to prosper. Austin had expanded the operation, buying additional land and increasing the herd. They hired more hands, and Clara's days were busier than ever feeding and managing a larger household. But it was good work, satisfying work, and she felt proud of what they were building together. When Tom was 5 and Mary 3, Clara discovered she was pregnant again. This time, Austin insisted on hiring help for her, bringing in a young woman named Grace to assist with the housework and child care. "You can't do everything, Clara," he said when she protested the expense. "I want you healthy, and I want you to be able to enjoy this pregnancy, not just survive it." The third baby, another boy they named Samuel Austin, was born in late autumn. He was a placid child, happy to observe his older siblings' antics from the safety of his mother's arms. On Samuel's first Christmas, The house was full of light and laughter. Clara stood in the doorway of the parlor, watching Austin build a tower of blocks for the children to knock down. Tom, now 6, was carefully showing his younger sister how to be gentle with the baby. Mary, ever independent, was ignoring his instructions and doing things her own way. "Come sit with us," Austin called to Clara, patting the floor beside him. She settled next to her husband, baby Samuel content in her lap, and felt peace wash over her. This life, this family, this home, it was everything she'd never dared to dream of during those dark days at the mission. Austin seemed to read her thoughts. He took her hand and squeezed it gently. "Happy, incredibly. You, more than I have words for." He leaned over to kiss her temple. "Thank you for saying yes that day. Thank you for trusting me. Best decision I ever made." "Second best," Austin corrected with a smile. "First best was getting back on Daisy and riding out with me the next morning. That took real courage." The children clamored for their father's attention, and the moment of quiet reflection passed, but Clara held his words close to her heart. Years continued to flow by like water. Tom grew tall and serious, fascinated by the workings of the ranch. By the time he was 12, he was working alongside the hands during summer, learning the business from the ground up. Mary remained spirited and independent, announcing at age 8 that she intended to learn to rope and ride as well as any boy. Austin, to Clara's amused resignation, supported this goal and taught their daughter everything he knew. Samuel proved to be the scholar of the family, always with a book in hand, asking questions about everything. When he was 7, Austin brought home a collection of books from town, and Samuel read every one within months. Where did he get this hunger for learning? Austin wondered aloud. Clara smiled. From both of us. You taught all of them to question, to explore, to never accept that they couldn't do something. I taught them to love stories. In the summer when Tom was 14, Mary 12, and Samuel 9, Austin's friend James returned for a visit. He'd married himself several years earlier and brought his wife and young daughter with him. The house was full and noisy in the best possible way. One evening after the children had finally been herded to bed, the adults sat on the porch watching the stars emerge. "You've built something remarkable here," James said to Austin. "The ranch, your family, all of it." "We built it," Austin corrected, pulling Clara closer against his side. "Every good thing here exists because this woman took a chance on a stranger who offered her a ride." He was a pretty disreputable-looking stranger, too, Clara teased, trail-worn and scruffy. "But charming," Austin protested. Eventually, Clara conceded with a laugh. James's wife, Anne, smiled at them. "How did you really know? That first day, Clara, how did you know you could trust him?" Clara thought about it seriously. "I didn't, not completely. But I knew that staying at the mission meant staying stuck in the past, in the pain of being abandoned. Going with Austin meant moving forward, even if I didn't know where that path led. And there was something in his eyes, something honest and kind. I decided to trust that." "It was the best day of my life," Austin said quietly. "The day I found you." Later that night, alone in their bedroom, Austin held Clara close. They'd loved each other through the years, their physical relationship deepening alongside their emotional connection. Now, Austin traced the lines of her face in the moonlight streaming through the window. "You ever regret it?" he asked softly. "The life you might have had if things had been different." "Never," Clara said firmly. "Austin, those people who left me at the mission, they weren't my family. You are, our children are. This ranch, these people who work with us and care about us, they're my family. I found exactly where I was meant to be. I love you, Clara Marlowe, more every day. I love you too, always." When Tom turned 18, he announced his intention to stay on the ranch permanently. This is my home, Dad. I can't imagine being anywhere else. Austin gripped his son's shoulder proudly. Then we'll make you a partner. You've earned it. Mary, at 16, was beginning to attract the attention of young men in the area, much to her father's consternation and her mother's amusement. She's too young, Austin grumbled after a particularly persistent young cowboy had come calling. She's exactly the age I was when you proposed to me, Clara pointed out. That's different. How? Because I'm not ready for her to grow up yet. Clara touched his cheek fondly. None of us are ever ready, but it happens anyway. We raised her to be smart and strong. We have to trust that. Samuel, at 15, was talking about going to college, something almost unheard of in their community. Austin and Clara discussed it late into the night. It's expensive, Austin said. But if it's what he wants, we'll make it happen. Your mother would be proud, Clara said, that her grandson gets chances she never had. She would be proud of all of them, of you. Austin pulled his wife into his arms. Sometimes I think about that day at the mission. What would have happened if I'd ridden past, if I hadn't stopped? But you did stop. You saw me and you chose to help. That's who you are, Austin. That's who you've always been. We've had a good life, haven't we? The best life. On their 20th wedding anniversary, the children conspired to give their parents a day alone together. Tom, now 21 and confident in managing the ranch, insisted his father take the day off. Mary, 19 and as capable as any hand they employed, promised to handle anything that came up. Samuel, 17 and about to leave for college, made his parents promise to enjoy themselves. Austin and Clara rode out together to the spot where he'd proposed, the rise behind the house with its endless view of ranch land and sky. They'd made this ride countless times over the years, but today it felt special, weighted with memory and gratitude. 20 years, Clara said, settling into Austin's arms as they sat on the warm grass. It doesn't feel that long. It feels like forever and no time at all, Austin said. I can't remember who I was before you, can't imagine existing without you. We've been blessed. We've been lucky, and we've worked hard. That matters too. They sat in comfortable silence, watching clouds drift across the vast Texas sky. Clara thought about the terrified girl she'd been, abandoned and alone at the mission. She thought about the moment she'd chosen to trust a stranger with blue eyes and steady hands. She thought about every day since, the joys and challenges, the laughter and tears, the ordinary moments that built a life. You think they ever regretted it? She asked suddenly. My stepparents, do you think they ever wondered what happened to me? Austin held her tighter. I don't know, and honestly, I don't care. They lost the chance to know the incredible woman you became. That's their loss, not yours. I used to fantasize about seeing them again, about showing them how well I'd done, how happy I was. I wanted them to regret leaving me. And now I realize I don't need their validation or their regret. I have everything that matters right here. She turned to kiss him softly. Thank you, Austin, for stopping that day, for seeing me when I felt invisible, for giving me a home and a family and a life beyond anything I dared to hope for. You gave me all of that too, Clara. I was just going through the motions before you. Now every day has meaning. They made love there on the hillside like newlyweds, then lay tangled together watching the sky change colors as afternoon moved toward evening. We should head back, Clara said reluctantly. Probably. The kids will send out a search party if we're gone too long. But they lingered a bit longer, neither quite ready to break the spell of the day. When they finally rode back to the ranch as the sun set, they found the house ablaze with light and their children waiting on the porch. Happy anniversary, the three called out in unison. Inside, they'd prepared a celebration. The table was laden with Clara's favorite foods. all prepared by Mary with help from Grace, who still worked for them after all these years. Tom had brought out Austin's best whiskey, and Samuel had written a poem for the occasion that made both his parents tear up. That night, surrounded by their children and the life they'd built, Clara and Austin looked at each other across the table and smiled. They'd come so far from that day at the mission. They'd built not just a ranch, but a legacy of love and hard work and family. The years continued to unfold. Samuel went off to college and eventually became a teacher, returning to Texas to educate the children of ranchers and cowboys. Mary married a young veterinarian and settled on a neighboring ranch, where she raised horses and 3 daughters who inherited her independence and fire. Tom married a sweet girl from town and brought her to live at the ranch, where she and Clara became close friends. Tom and his wife gave Austin and Clara their first grandson, a boy they named Austin James, and then twin daughters who kept everyone on their toes. Mary's 3 girls were frequent visitors, and Samuel, though he never married, was a beloved uncle who filled his nieces' and nephews' heads with stories and encouraged their curiosity. As Austin and Clara grew older, they gradually stepped back from the day-to-day operations of the ranch, trusting Tom to take over management. But they never stopped being involved, never stopped caring about every detail of the land and the people who worked it. On a warm spring evening when Clara was 52 and Austin 57, they sat together on their porch swing watching their grandchildren play in the yard. Tom's twins were chasing Mary's youngest daughter, while little Austin James solemnly explained something to Samuel, who listened with exaggerated attention. "We did good," Austin said softly. "We did better than good. We did wonderful." Austin took her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers in a gesture that had become second nature over 3 decades. "I love you, Clara, every bit as much as I did that morning at the mission when I told you that you were traveling with me. I love you too. You were my salvation, Austin Marlowe. You saved my life." "No," he said gently. "We saved each other, and then we built this." He gestured at the scene before them, the thriving ranch, the solid house, the beautiful grandchildren, the legacy of love they'd created together. "This is what happens when 2 people choose each other every single day." Clara leaned her head on his shoulder, perfectly content. "Choose me again tomorrow, every tomorrow for the rest of my life," and he did. Through all the years that followed, through joy and sorrow, health and illness, easy times and hard, Austin and Clara chose each other. They watched their grandchildren grow and have children of their own. They celebrated 50th and 60th anniversaries, surrounded by a family that had grown beyond anything they'd imagined. When Austin passed peacefully in his sleep at 73, Clara grieved deeply, but not without comfort. She had their children and grandchildren around her. She had memories of a love that had sustained her through decades. She had the knowledge that she'd been cherished every day of her marriage. She lived another 5 years, her mind sharp even as her body weakened. In those final years, she often sat on the porch and thought about that day at the mission, about the choice she'd made to trust a stranger, about the life that had unfolded from that single moment of courage. On her last day, surrounded by family, Clara smiled peacefully. "What are you thinking about, Grandma?" little Austin James asked. He was a young man now, preparing to take over the ranch from his father. "About the day I met your grandfather, about how he rode up to that mission like an answer to a prayer I hadn't known how to pray. About how he looked at me like I was someone worth saving. He loved you so much, and I loved him. Every day with everything I had." She took her grandson's hand. "That's the secret, you know, not just finding love but choosing it, nurturing it, building on it day after day. Your grandfather and I, we worked at our love like we worked at this ranch. We tended it, protected it, helped it grow. I'll remember that, Grandma. Good. And remember, too, that sometimes the best things in life come from the hardest moments. I was abandoned and afraid, and from that came everything beautiful in my life. Don't be afraid of hard times, Austin. They're often the beginning of something wonderful. Clara Marlowe passed that evening as the sun set over the Texas plains she'd come to love. She was buried next to Austin on the hilltop where he'd proposed, where they'd celebrated their 20th anniversary, where they'd watched countless sunsets together over the years. At her funeral, her children and grandchildren shared stories of her strength, her kindness, her unwavering love for family. They talked about how she'd transformed a bachelor's rough ranch house into a true home. They remembered her laughter, her wisdom, her ability to make everyone feel valued and loved. But perhaps the most fitting tribute came from Samuel, the scholar of the family, now a gray-haired man himself. He stood at his mother's grave and read from a journal she'd kept throughout her life. Today marks 40 years since the day my life truly began. He read from an entry written on her 40th wedding anniversary. 40 years since I climbed onto a horse named Daisy and rode away from despair toward hope. 40 years since Austin Marlowe looked at me and saw not a burden but a person worth saving. I was abandoned at a mission by people who were supposed to love me. But from that abandonment came this beautiful life, this family, this love that has sustained me through everything. If I could go back and speak to that terrified 19-year-old girl, I would tell her this: trust him. Take the chance. The path forward is scary, but it leads to more joy than you can imagine. Your heart will break and heal and grow. You will be loved beyond measure. You will build something that lasts far beyond your lifetime. So when he says you are traveling with him now, believe him, and hold on tight for the most amazing journey of your life. Samuel closed the journal, his voice thick with emotion. She held on tight, and she never let go. And because she chose to trust, to hope, to love, all of us are here today. Mom and Dad's love story didn't just create a family. It created a legacy that will continue for generations. Years later, when the Marlowe Ranch celebrated its 100th anniversary, it was still thriving under the management of Austin and Clara's descendants. The house had been expanded and updated, but the core that Clara had transformed from a bachelor's chaos into a home remained. The bedroom where she and Austin had slept for decades was preserved as it had been, a reminder of the love that had built everything. And in the parlor, hanging in a place of honor, was a painting commissioned shortly before Austin's death. It showed a young woman on a gentle mare, riding beside a cowboy on a bay gelding, both silhouetted against a rising sun. Beneath it was a simple plaque: "They abandoned her at the mission. A traveling cowboy said, 'You're traveling with me now. This is where our story began.'" It was a reminder to every generation that followed that love could emerge from the darkest circumstances, that choosing hope over despair could change everything, and that sometimes the best things in life came from taking a chance on a stranger who saw you when you felt invisible. Clara and Austin's story became family legend, told and retold to each new generation. It was a story about abandonment and rescue, about choice and courage, about two people who found each other at exactly the right moment and built something beautiful that lasted far beyond their lifetimes. But most of all, it was a love story. A real, deep, abiding love that had weathered every storm, celebrated every joy, and created a foundation strong enough to support generations. It was proof that sometimes, in the darkest moment, life offers an unexpected chance. And sometimes, if you're brave enough to take it, that chance becomes everything. In the wild country of New Mexico and Texas in the late 1800s, amid the hardship and beauty of frontier life, Clara Vaughn and Austin Marlowe found each other. They chose each other, built with each other, and loved each other until their last breaths. And the legacy of that love, born from abandonment and a stranger's kindness, lived on in every child, grandchild, and great-grandchild who called the Marlowe Ranch home. It was, in the end, exactly what Austin had promised that first day. Clara had traveled with him, and together they had gone further than either could have gone alone. They had built not just a life, but a legacy. Not just a family, but a dynasty of love that would endure as long as the Texas sky stretched overhead, and the grass grew green on the plains they'd called home.